Welcome to the final episode of the Executive Workflow Revolution. Over the past 3 weeks, we've covered Workflow 1, turning daily reporting from 45 minutes into 2 to 3 minutes. Workflow 2, creating training in 30 minutes and deploying it in 60 languages. Today, we're tackling Workflow 3, strategic storytelling. This is where the Executive Workflow Revolution shows its true power. Board presentations, workforce plan, quarterly business reviews, strategic initiatives. These presentations take 2 to 3 days to create. And by the time you're finished, your assumptions have already shifted. What if you could create board-ready strategic presentations in 2 hours instead of 2 days? Not templates, not shortcuts, but genuinely sophisticated analysis with scenario modeling, financial projections, risk assessments, and clear recommendations. Kind of presentation that makes the CFO nod, that makes the board ask smart questions, that positions you as a strategic advisor, not just an operations manager. Let me show you what it really takes to create a strategic presentation. You're planning workforce for next year, for example. 3 scenarios: conservative, moderate, aggressive growth. Day 1, you gather the data, you build your financial models, you run scenarios, create projections, analyze risks. Day 2, you start building the slides, charts, tables, executive summaries, recommendations, making it look professional. Day 3, refine, polish, rehearse, get feedback, revise again. 16 to 24 hours of work, sometimes more. And here's the painful part. By the time you present to the board, it may have already shifted. Assumptions may have changed. You may be presenting last week's thinking, but you can't update it. You don't have another 3 days. So you present what you have. This is the strategic trap. Makes you reactive instead of proactive. It positions you as a reporter instead of a strategist. But what if you could model scenarios in real time? What if you could answer what if questions on the fly? That's what this workflow enables. So here's the breakthrough. AI can now take your strategic data and analysis and transform it into board-ready presentations with comprehensive scenario modeling, financial projections, risk assessments, and clear recommendations in 2 hours instead of 2 days. I'm using Gamma for this. Same tool, but applied to strategic decision-making and storytelling. This demo, I'm showing workforce planning with 3 scenario modeling, but this works for any strategic presentation. Let me walk you through it. Here's my workforce planning analysis. Scenario A, conservative growth, maintaining the current capacity, focus on efficiency. Scenario B is moderate growth, 50% growth, balanced approach. Scenario C, aggressive growth, 30% growth, market expansion. Each scenario has headcount projections, cost implications, revenue impact, risk factors, and implementation timelines with benefits and investment required. This is the analysis you'd normally spend day 1 creating. I've got this ready. Now watch what happens when we turn this into a board presentation. I'm going to use a structured prompt that tells Gamma exactly what kind of strategic presentation to create. I pasted the main prompt as text into this dialog box, and it reads as follows. Create a board-ready workforce planning presentation with 3 scenario analysis. I'm instructing Gamma that they can find the strategic data and the scenarios below the instructions. But for the presentation itself, it must have an executive summary, the current state assessment, 3 scenario comparison matrix, detailed analysis of all 3 scenarios, financial projection, comparison, risk assessment and mitigation strategies for the recommended scenario, implementation roadmap, an appendix with detailed assumptions and sensitivity analysis. I'm instructing furthermore on the tone, the format, the design, and then I've pasted the strategic data and scenarios at the bottom of this prompt. Tell Gamma to generate it from the notes and the outline. I just click generate. While it's working, Gamma is analyzing the scenarios, creating comparison frameworks, building financial models, generating risk assessments, structuring the narrative, and creating executive quality visuals. And done. Let's see what we got. Notice what I asked in the prompt was not just data presentation, but strategic storytelling. Clear recommendation backed by rigorous analysis, just what boards need. So the first slide, we can see the current state, where we are today, key metrics, context for the decision. The next slide is about the 3 strategic scenarios. Slide 4 to 6 is all about scenario A, the conservative approach. Then, after that, scenario B and C is discussed in detail. Then we come to the recommended strategy and the justification for it. We also have a slide on risk assessment with the identified risks for recommended scenario and the mitigation strategies for each. And getting to the end of it, we also have an implementation roadmap with key milestones, resources required, and success metrics. But here's the real power. What if the CFO or any other board member asks, what if we did scenario B, but phased it over 18 months instead of 12? We simply go and reprompt that same question right here and then and regenerate the scenarios and assessments. When we finish it, Gamma will show us the original and the modified version. In the old way, you'd have to say, let me get back to you next week. In the new world, I adjust the assumptions, regenerate the relevant slides, and answer in real time. That's the difference between being a reporter and being a strategist. Here we can see scenario B, an alternative over 18 months phased implementation instead of 12 months. How that impacts hiring velocity, training cohort size, capital investment, revenue ramp, attrition risk, manager bandwidth. Key advantages, trade-offs to consider, financial impact, and further discussions around this alternative strategy. Let's be clear about what just happened. The old way, 2 to 3 days to create presentation. Presenting last week's thinking. Can't respond to real-time questions. Positioned as operations manager. Newer, 2 to 3 hours to create presentation. Current analysis and thinking. Can model scenarios on the fly. Positioned as strategic advisor. But here's the real transformation. When you can create strategic presentations in hours instead of days, you can model more scenarios, test more assumptions, respond to changing conditions, and be proactive instead of reactive. You transform from someone who reports on the past to someone who shapes the future. That's the difference between an executor and strategist. Now, the critical warning. AI can create beautiful presentations around bad analysis. Here's how to do this right. Rule 1. Your analysis must be sound. AI doesn't replace strategic thinking. It accelerates presentation creation. You still need rigorous analysis. Rule number 2. Validate your assumptions. Garbage in, garbage out. If your scenarios are based on flawed assumptions, you'll get a beautiful presentation that leads to bad decisions. Rule number 3, review with a strategic lens. Don't just check if the slides look good. Check if the logic holds, if the recommendations make sense, if the risks are accurately assessed. Rule number 4, test with trusted advisors. Before you present to the board, test with your CFO or a trusted colleague. Get feedback on the substance, not just the style. Rule number 5, own the content. This is your presentation, your recommendation, your analysis. You do the strategic thinking, AI handles the presentation creation. The return on investment is clear. If you create 4 strategic presentations per year, you could be saving between 40 to 60 hours per year. But the real value, you're now the person who can model scenarios in real time. You can answer what-if questions on the fly. We bring strategic options, not just operational reports. That's the executive workflow revolution. Workflow 1, daily narratives in minutes. Workflow 2, global training at scale. And workflow 3, strategic storytelling in hours. Together, nearly 300 hours reclaimed per year. But more importantly, you transform from executor to strategist. Want the strategic presentation templates and scenario modeling guide? Check the description for exclusive resources. Thank you for joining me on this journey.